So the Syracuse Canal Mules, we recently discovered, kind of rediscovered, if you will. They were a Canal-era hockey team.
The members of the team primarily were employees at a brewery in Syracuse called Greenways, and then after work they would go out and play hockey on the canal.
And playing those games, they would bring their homebrewed beers. And that's kind of where the formation of the very first beer league hockey team was created.
When the canal was filled in Syracuse in the mid-1920s after the construction of the modern barge canal, we assumed that the Canal Mules just kind of faded into history. However, further research, especially into contemporary newspapers, led us to discover that the Canal Mules in fact kept playing.
But they just played in different cities around New York,
where they found fellow teams in that area to play against them. One of the Rochester area teams that we found were intense rivals of the Canal Mules were the Hoodledashers.
Well, we know the rivalry between Syracuse and Rochester today in the American Hockey League, between the Crunch and the Americans, is as good as it gets. But it's amazing that the rivalry actually dates back when the Canal Mules were playing the Hoodledashers.
So when I came to Rochester, there were a lot of things that I learned about the history of the city, the fact that there had been an NFL team, an NBA team, and then looking back in the history of the beer league annals, there was the Hoodledashers.
One of the teams in Rochester was named the Hoodledashers,
who get their name from one of our favorite canal terms. A Hoodledasher on the canal is two canal boats linked together, usually lashed together so you could double how much you carried on the canal. We believe that the Hoodledashers of Rochester got their name in a somewhat similar fashion as two of their players, who we believe to be the modern equivalent of enforcers. Imagine the Hanson brothers 50 years early, kind of. Stanislav Zarzitsky and Rocco Vitali.
They would link arms and connect together, kind of like a Hoodledasher, and then take out the goalie,
allowing them to score uncontested.
And that kind of gritty style that made the Hoodledashers who they were was the igniter and the catalyst for really bringing the rivalry up with the Canal Mules to a whole nother level.
The Canal Mules were known as the Canal Mules because they were as tough as mules. They played hard-nosed hockey, physical hockey, and old-time hockey. And I can assure you that the Canal Mules did not take kindly to the move done by the Hoodledashers.
I played my junior hockey in Spokane, Washington. Went to high school in the U.S. As a Canadian, I was different, and learned so much. Learned about the history of the U.S. and hockey, and all the way out west, we even learned about the Canal Mules and the history that it is over here.
So we found record of the Canal Mules again when we found a newspaper that referenced this specific game with the Rochester Hoodledashers.
And depending on where you found your information, you would see that they played 4 times, and Rochester had won all 4 games, and then in another newspaper, Syracuse had won all 4 games. So this rivalry almost spanned off the ice, within the media, within the markets.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, since they were the Hoodledashers, they've been playing hard-nosed hockey, so it makes sense why, now it's always a hard-fought game. For them to have those two guys pulling off that move, it kind of amps up the rivalry now, knowing about it now, for sure.
Whether it was Canal Mules and Hoodledashers or Crunch and Amherst, these cities have never liked each other.
Much like the Canal Mules, who are employees of Greenways Brewing Company here in Syracuse, the Hoodledashers, we believe, were primarily employees of the Genesee Brewing Company.
The Hoodledashers' technique was part of a rivalry between the two breweries. The Hoodledashers really wanted to beat the Mules.
Like we kind of discovered last year, we can see this network of, honest-to-God, beer league hockey forming throughout the canal corridor.
One of my favorite things about Syracuse is the history. You walk around the city and you see all the old buildings and all the character that this city has, and to play in a game that represents the history of the city, against Rochester and the rivalry that they've had going back 100 years is special, and I know the fans love it and the players love it too.
In the newspaper report that we found talking about the Hoodledasher game, we also saw a report that canals were being used with slip scrapers to clean the ice.
Slip scrapers are an essential tool in building and maintaining the Erie Canal.
A slip scraper was a precursor to a couple of modern technologies that we have right now. In the era of building the canal, it was kind of like an early bulldozer.
They're essentially large shovels that are pulled behind mules that clear and level the ground, allowing for a nice, even canal bed. Later, we believe that the Canal Mules and Hoodledashers would use this to become one of really the game's first ice resurfacers.
Finding evidence of the Rochester Genesee Brewing Company team, the Hoodledashers, shows that this may have been a more widespread phenomenon and that there was truly groundwork for a beer hockey league in the canal corridor.
Yeah, I mean, coming to Syracuse, I didn't know much about the history, but learning about the canal and being able to represent the Canal Mules last year was a really awesome experience. And to hear that, this 30-year rivalry we've had with Rochester actually goes back 100 years is really, really cool. And it makes the game on Saturday, that much more special.
We've got a lot of history with them. It's always a battle against them. And I think it goes all the way back to the Hoodledashers versus the Mules. We've heard stories about them back then. And the game's changed a little bit, but the rivalry's still there.
Research here at the Canal Museum continues on the Syracuse Canal Mules and these other hockey teams that appear to have existed all along the route of the canal, forming almost an early beer hockey league.